As I started analyzing this student's paper, I thought about what the student was doing well. A lot of kids, whenever they write, they get messed up in the stimulus. So this student has done a really good job of making sure that none of this stuff got in the way of really focusing on what the writing charge was. Then the student looked in on what he had to write an essay explaining one way that people can work together to make a difference. And he pretty much took that same word choice and made a thesis statement with it. People can stand together to make a difference. Then, as I looked over how the writer organized the ideas, the first paragraph was about a peaceful protest. The second paragraph was about standing up for what was right. And the third paragraph was about bullies and how if, all the victims stood up against the bullies, there would be more of them. The organizational structure of the paper itself follows what we really think about how expository text works. This part right here, if I were to highlight it, I could say that that's the introduction. Then this part right here, I could say that that is the closure. And then what this kid does right here is you can see that this part is probably what he considers to be his body paragraph with the three different reasons. Now, what I think we need to do now is look at, since he really does have this organizational structure down and really kind of understands what an expository essay looks like, there's more benefits and value to this writing that might not initially appear when we first look at it. That's probably why the second reader in this case gave the piece a 2. Whereas the other reader was so overwhelmed by all the surface features and the handwriting and presentation and spelling issues and sentence boundary issues that they couldn't see that the real organizational structure is there. Whenever I look at what this student has done, I'm going to tease out this piece right here. We can protest, stand for what's right. There are more people getting bullied than there are bullies. The victims could stand against that. That one right there is actually the same idea as this one down here. So I would say to this kid that when you have the same thing to say, you don't want to have it up here in the beginning and here down at the bottom. You want to keep all like ideas with like. Now when I read it, it says, we can protest, stand for what's right. There are more people getting bullied than there are bullies. The victims could stand against that. People are getting bullied. There are a lot of victims to bullying. There are more victims than there are bullies. So if all the victims, maybe that says stayed against the bullies, they could overpower them. There's a lot of repetition here now that if I turn on the track changes part, you can see kind of what I'm about to do here. What I want to do is, now that I have like ideas with like, so I'm going to put some commentary in here for the student. Then get rid of repetition. I always spell that wrong. Good thing I have autocorrect. Now what I'm going to do is look for things that are saying the same thing. And the way I do that is I read the sentence and then compare it to the next one. We can protest, stand for what's right. I think that that really is one sentence right there. So now I'm going to compare to the next sentence. There are more people getting bullied than there are bullies. Well, that's a new idea. Now I'd compare to the next idea. The victims could stand against that. That's a new idea. People are getting bullied. That's repeated. I'm going to delete and see how it crosses it out. That way I can still see it when I track changes in case I want to go back and edit and use an idea. I don't have to worry about it being lost. There are a lot of victims to bullying. That is saying the same thing, that there are more people getting bullied than there are bullies. So I'm going to delete it because it's repetitive. There are more victims than there are bullies. That does not say anything new. That is also repetitive. So if all the victims stayed against the bullies, they could overpower them. That's a new idea. That's my first idea to share with this student. When you write, put like ideas with like ideas, and then get rid of anything that repeats. Now, the next idea that he has here is people can stand for what they want through a peaceful protest. Violent protest doesn't really get people anywhere. That's an idea, but it doesn't have any development with it. People can stand together for what's right. If a lot of people see something doing wrong, they could stand against it. Again, there's two sentences here, but they don't really develop the idea fully so that the reader can get an idea of what the writer is talking about. The most powerful thing that I think that this writer could do, and is very doable right here, is this part right here. This is a generic idea. Yes, of course you could have a peaceful protest. This one right here is also an example of a generic idea. And the writer is already establishing a comparison and a contrast. You can make a difference through a peaceful protest contrasted to a violent protest. You're not going to make a difference. Instead of leaving it as a generic idea and making it to where a reader can see that you can make a difference through a peaceful protest, we can use an example. And so I would ask this student to think of a specific example in the world, in a book, in history, in the news, in his own life, and think about what is an example of a peaceful protest that didn't hurt anyone for being able to do this. I'm thinking about one from history as Rosa Parks. When Rosa Parks did her thing, a lot of the community decided to do a peaceful protest by not riding the bus, which made it to where the city really didn't have a lot of money to maintain the bus service. And that through that peaceful protest, they realized that the rules needed to change about the seating arrangements on the buses themselves, and the laws then changed. The same thing can happen right here. The generic idea here is that there is a violent protest. So is there a specific example of a violent protest that didn't get people anywhere with what they wanted? I'm trying to think of an example from sports, when people rioted in the streets whenever their team didn't win. What ended up happening is their team still lost, but the community had extreme losses in that area, and businesses and small businesses and families lost their livelihood from the damage that was caused to the buildings. Insurance costs and security costs and all of those things were rising because of those protests. You could think about protests in the world, protests in history, the news going on right now. Maybe there is something that schools you have heard about on Facebook or any of your social media. Those things could be written about in several sentences that would really develop those ideas fully, that would raise this paper to probably a passing score.